TV.
Welcome everybody, my name is Leon van Rooij and tonight you're going to join us at Playground's in-depth interview with a very special guest tonight. We have for tonight Ilse Harting. Ilse,
Hi.
welcome in our show.
Thank you for having me.
It's called In-Depth because we have all the time to discuss a lot of topics that we really want to know about you. Because like online there's like a lot of work, but around as an artist it's like a little bit mythical online. We couldn't find that much, so we thought this is a good opportunity to invite you and to get a little bit, know you a little bit better.
Right, yes.
Ilse Harting,
Hi.
where are you from? How old?
I'm 27 year old. I'm from Lelystad, here in the Netherlands. I still live there. And I'm an artist.
Are you an artist?
Yes, that's
Yes.
why I'm here, I think.
Hey, and you studied in the Netherlands,
Yes.
I understood. What kind of course did you...
I went to University of the Arts, Artes in Zwolle, and I studied animation design there, the bachelor. I finished that the study there, and I didn't go and do animation afterwards, though. The school made sure that I never liked animation ever again.
Oh.
So that's a bit of my...
Tell us the reason why you don't like animation anymore.
It was a bit harsher than I meant it to be, but I found out through school that animation was not necessarily the direction I wanted to go in, at least not the production of it, like the tedious 2D animating. I fell out of love with during the course, but I fell in love with the production of game design. So when I was in school, in one of my last years, I asked them if I could, instead of an animation design internship, if I could do a game design internship, and they luckily let me do that, so I could taste a bit of that world that was out there that I couldn't through school, and it was the best thing I did, because then I found out that that's actually the thing that I wanted to do. And went off into that direction once I graduated and went to put together my portfolio or went to events and really promoted myself as to be game studio artist. It was still hard because I was still in my art is very illustrative, and most game design studios would like to have an artist that makes concept art most of the time. It's more about ideas than pretty illustrations. So my portfolio did not match up with most of the companies, so that was an issue in the beginning. But yeah.
But it's also quite difficult for you because art academies, at least in the Netherlands, are not like really well known with this industry.
No.
And I can also imagine that when you are drawing like a little bit more like this in a Dutch art academy, it's not always approved in a way. Did you also experience like a lot of negative feedback working in these kind of style?
Yes, and I think for good reason, but also for bad reasons. It's a bit of a middle ground, in my opinion, because when you go to an art school, it is very normal to have you be thrown into an area where you're ripped apart and you're supposed to get out of your comfort zone and try out all kinds of different styles and techniques and find different ways. Also, you got to find the things you hate as well as much as you might like. So you're thrown out there and you have to do all these things that you might not even be interested in. And you were telling them, but I want to draw this. And they're like, no, you can't. You have to expand your horizon. And that's very valid for multiple reasons. Of course, you need to have an insight into all kinds of things. Even if you try 20 things and you only take away one of those 20 things and you take that with you throughout your whole career, then that path was worth it, in my opinion. But even then, at some point, I think art academies should make a better split in where they start giving you more your own say towards the work you want to make. Because the first few years, if you're being ripped apart and you have to do all these things, it's good for you. But after that, they don't give you a possibility to really do the things you want after you've experienced all these things. And I think that's rips apart the identity of the artist a bit, which makes them doubt themselves a lot right before graduation, in where they actually need to know who they want to be and where they want to apply and start promoting themselves as a certain identity, but it's been ripped. So So that was the hard part for me, at least.
And you think that should be changed in the art academies in the future?
Or at least managed. I think managed better. It's not that the whole ripping apart is a bad thing. Like I said, you can learn a lot from it, but it stopped the moment I had to start graduating. So I had to make my final animation. All of a sudden they said, you can do whatever you want. But the past 3 years they told me, you can't do anything you want to do. So all of a sudden I had to grasp at all these small bits I ripped apart, like, what do I actually want to do? And that's then when I found out that I didn't even want to do animation anymore, but I still had to graduate in animation, and I had to make my film. So it was and I would have liked to find that out a little earlier by having them let me do these things a little earlier, basically.
Hey, and was there like a huge, what they say, like gap between the art academy and get your first steps and making your first steps in the industry and get like more known with your work?
I think there's a big time gap mostly. I mean, you have to get yourself out there. I started social media right at the point of graduating, and but it was more. I knew that I was not good enough yet for the industry itself right after school, because I did not feel like I was properly educated to be in a studio of any kind. I had my internship at a game design studio for 5 months, and I learned a lot in that studio about how the ins and outs of studio work even goes. So I took a lot from that, and I started to just work a lot on my skills. I had one art job 2 weeks right after I graduated, which was a small comic type job. I had to make coloring illustrations, and that was like a 1 day in a week type deal, which I got paid for. But the rest of the week was all personal work, where I just focused on trying to better my skills and get better and find out what I actually wanted, because I knew that if I wanted to apply for certain companies, I needed to have their skills. So that was my only focus at that point. I had immense free time after school, because there's no school anymore. So I focused on just getting more skills and making some side money.
Where did you find that skills?
You mean the means of
getting
skills?
So did you say I was looking for more skills? So how did you gain that skills? Was it like more online? Did you do a lot of tutorials?
Yeah, mostly internet, yes. I mean, for example, YouTube is full of recommendations. You have places like Gumroad where people sell tutorials. If you see an artist that you just really love, just Google them. I dissected their art and just tried to find any tutorials or whatever they had, and tried to apply it on my own work. And I took away whatever I wanted from that and just moved on to the next artist, basically. It's a bit...
artist hopping.
Artist hopping, in a way. It's like... because you don't always... you might have an idol, like an artist idol, that at that moment you're like, oh, I want to be them, you know? You have that feeling. But once you start to actually study them, like thoroughly, they become... they're still interesting people, but you find out that exact specific thing that you like about them, which just might be only their perspective or the way of coloring or just their expressions of their characters, their faces. So you take that away from them and then you move on. And that's how I've been learning over the years and from different artists and trying to develop my own style in that way, basically.
And also, do you also have different references than online artists and probably digital artists that you were analyzing in tutorials, etc.? But are you also inspired by other stuff than?
Mostly real life in combination with other artists. 'Cause I love just looking around and walking. It sounds a bit cliche, but I mean the real world, how you interpret it in art is your own special version, basically, and just studying from other artists is basically you're learning through their lens, so through their view of the world, basically, and which is an interesting way to look at it, because you see their translation from what they see to what they apply to their work, and it's a good thing to take note of. But your own translations are the key to getting your own style eventually. You take bits from other people, so that's my main inspiration, basically, reality. Yeah.
All right, and you just showed some early, this is all quite early work, the first manga drawings, looking back at like 10 years ago? Or
No, that was like
the first manga drawings?
One of the manga ones I made inside the cafeteria of the art academy. So yeah, that was like Spite or something, I guess.
All right, and then you see slowly more movement towards reality and more like painting kind of style.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to go that direction and let go a little bit the more manga kind of visual culture?
One thing was they said that you can never become a mangaka, so why do you even try? Was one part of it in where I started to let loose. But the other thing that brought me into that world is by what's the English word for it? Life drawing.
Okay.
I did life drawing in school, and that was my most favorite subject ever. It taught me a lot. I was really bad at it in the beginning. I cried a lot. I could just not. I was just look at a person and just draw, and then look again and wait, it's not the same because I didn't look at all at the artwork. I didn't even know or at the subject. I didn't know anything about realism or gesture drawings or anything. So the whole year was an extreme growth in realistic and gesture-like sketching, which is of course the complete opposite of the more static images of manga. So these two started to merge a bit at home because I was getting better at one thing and the other felt lacking. So these became a bit of a mix at some point. A very awkward mix sometimes because you just grab the wrong things of each style and start mixing them, and it just doesn't. It feels uncanny in a way. So it was a lot of trial and error, and most of the art I look at, if I look at it from back then, it's a bit cringy. It doesn't work, but it was a really a time full of growth, basically.
Yeah, and I really, if we look at these works, it has like this kind of dreamy effect. It's also really almost like photography, kind of realism.
Yeah. At that time, I really
loved
loved
how you use the light. What were you aiming for?
I really loved portraiture for sure. That was my number one thing. I think for a lot of starting artists that have an affinity for just pretty art, start with portrait drawings of women. It's very common tropey almost, I think. And I fell into that category. I just loved lighting. I just loved faces. It's so expressive. And aside from that, I started to develop an interest in like rendering materials and hair and skin, and started to really go into how does light work and how does it reflect on this surface. And faces were just very perfect ways of studying that, basically. So it was a comfort zone, but also a place where I could learn new skills.
A few years ago, I was in Denmark, in Copenhagen. There's a lot of like Scandinavian art. It looks almost like a little bit sometimes a Scandinavian touch to it. Are you also inspired by Scandinavian painters, or is this like a coincidence?
I think it's a coincidence.
Okay, because this dreamlike kind of look, it really reminds me to the Scandinavian.
Okay, cool. I didn't know about that, no.
Maybe it's because of the mythology that also shines through a little bit.
Yeah.
Here's another example. How do you pick your subjects in that sense around this time?
The subjects I chose, these were studies from photographs. And at that time, I was really into stylizing existing photographs because it was just...
Okay, so this is all like as reference, you took original photos and then you start...
To stylize it, because for me at that point, and I recommend to do that for everyone, it's the best way of learning and also finding out what your styles are at the same time, because you're studying for something, so you don't have to come up with a concept yourself, which is usually the hard part of drawing. So you have something that you think is appealing, and how are you going to translate that to what you want, and how are you going to what are you going to emphasize and what are you going to push away, and what are your choices thereof, and afterwards you can look and see the things you actually like the most and which you highlighted in the drawing, and it gives you a sense of what you like. It tells you a bit about yourself, basically.
And here you see also some more early work.
Yes.
And there is also like this sense of realism in it, but sometimes you also let it go. It becomes more like cartoony versus like really realistic. Mm-hmm. Is that also to challenge yourself, or is it like trying things out? Or
mostly trying things out, because I could never settle completely on one specific style at all. I always felt like the grass is greener somewhere else, and I just had to do that. And once I got the hang of it, I moved on again. And I felt a bit insecure about that at first, because you feel like I can't hold on to a specific style. I don't have an identity or anything, which is, of course, a very normal insecurity to have. But I think it's good to just try a couple of different things, and you'll take away from it what you think works for you, and you move on to the next thing, and you will take away whatever you learned from trying a specific thing. Yeah.
Hey, and if you compare your more earlier work to the work you're now creating, what is like the biggest difference? If you say, okay, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, if I would compare it with what I'm now drawing, what is the biggest?
I think there would be simplicity, mostly, because all my illustrations took between 14 to 24 hours to make, like total work time, because I just loved, I mean, it was part of what I loved doing. I loved the niddly bit, like the first 80% of the illustration was maybe the first 3 hours, and the last 20% was the rest of the hours, just because I loved noodling on art a lot. It's almost a bit therapeutic.
Therapeutic?
Yeah, therapeutic in a way. I love doing it. But
it's never finished.
No, it's never finished. It was almost, the end result was not the end goal. It was the process of just drawing all these hairs that were really like soothing in a way. But it was detrimental to my art, because the end work was like completely rendered to that. So at some point, if I wanted to grow, I started to actually stop earlier. And the first few times that I did that, it was very like direct. Like in Photoshop, you have these layers. I always duplicate a group of where I'm at, like at the process, so I can always go back a few steps. And at one point, I rendered something completely to that, and I felt like, okay, but where did it go wrong? So I just went back a few steps, and then, okay, this is the finished piece. Like 4 hours ago, that was the finished piece. I'll just post that one. That was. So I started to cut myself back on time and noodling a lot, and started to get to the essence of an illustration more. And I think that's the biggest difference. It's more of a mindset difference that translates to eventual style difference. Yeah, that's.
And you posted, like what you mentioned, when you graduated at the Art Academy, you directly start posting it on social media.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that response that you sometimes get? Like, because you can compare a lot on social media, and when you're just starting off, and you just already mentioned a little bit, like, it's never finished. It also sometimes comes forward from an insecurity,
Yes.
etc. How did you deal now with it, if you compare that when first posting and now?
There was a very, like a weird growth path in between, because when I first started, I really didn't care about like followers or anything. I just wanted to, oh look, this is a thing, I can share art to the world. And it was just an interesting experience to have at least like 4 people that are not your family respond and say, hey, that's nice. Like, oh, you think so? Oh, thank you. So it was all very pure and innocent in the beginning, until it started to become like a growth goal. At some point, people told me, if you have a big follower account, you will get better jobs, and you know, it's a status symbol in a way. And so it got it in my head that I needed more followers to be a better artist, and so I started to draw a lot and post a lot. And my work style was at that point of time really labor heavy, so I worked a lot for minimal results in digital likes and digital validation. So it was not a good mental period.
So it was for you like too big combined with motivation versus likes online, and
it was really toxic.
Okay.
It was a toxic combination, because I had it in my head that you needed to have like a lot of followers to be considered good. Or it's nowadays I don't think like that at all anymore. I've grown out of that, but it was a very specific part in the career when it really started to take off. That I was really focused on why did this one not get likes and why did this one get likes, and it was a very toxic relationship to have. And how I dealt with it was mostly talking to other people, talking to other artists with their experiences and how they felt about it all. So it just felt nice to have like a couple of close friends where you can.
What was their advice to you?
Just not pay it any mind, which is a very straightforward, clean advice, which is hard to follow, obviously, because it's your mind that's in the way of actually doing those things. But yeah, social media is my problem with it is a little that you do need a bit of it to get a head start in the industry. It's like a necessary evil sort of thing, but it can also go too far, too fast if you let it consume you. So over the years, I've started to like post a bit less and less, and started to not focus on any of the like system. Whatever went well, and whatever didn't, and that made me a lot healthier.
Yeah, because I know I'm a teacher, as you know, and a lot of my students, they really sometimes feel overwhelmed by this whole social media, and it's also because there are so many, and they all look so great, and they have like a lot of likes.
Yes.
That they have the impression that they can't be an original anymore, that they can't cope with that kind of quality, that actually pulls them down. And it's good to hear from you that you, even though I know it's a hard advice to follow, but it's an important one, that you have to run your own race, right?
Yes. And I didn't even think about the fact that originality was such an important thing, because I think that was never an issue of mine, that I wanted to be original. I just wanted to be like appreciated for whatever I did, whether it was original or not, because I already gave up the whole idea of being original the moment I went into manga, because my whole traject has not been original in any way. So I've completely accepted the fact that I just drew aesthetically pleasing women, and that's that. Like there's and me and 1,000 or 100,000 other artists on Instagram do the same. So within that field, I just started to do the things that I loved within that field. And
so accepting, I'm not going to be an original, I'm just trying to be a good one.
I'm just trying to be a good one in what I love to do, and then the originality will come in itself, because you're going to listen exactly to whatever you want, and that is in most cases different than what other people see in that same type of thing. So you're more original than you think you're going to be if you let yourself be, basically.
Well, it's a really good advice, because I know that like from younger people who are starting in the industry or starting to share their work, they sometimes feel it really hard. So I think we can give them all the advice around this theme.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the process now, but also we're going to watch here a little bit more on the work. So this was also slowly from manga, more also based into game art, thinking like a little bit more story driven.
There was a point where I completely shifted to fantasy, because I thought, oh, games are fantasy, so I need to learn about fantasy. I need to draw elves now, quick. It needs to be my portfolio.
Pointy ears.
Pointy ears. We need game characters. Yeah, there was a whole shift in that. I just wanted to draw fantasy characters and magic, because then lighting could also be a slightly more magical in a way that's appealing to me. So.
All right, then we're going to watch a little bit more on the process part. How many hours a day do you draw actually to? How you said, okay, I have like work. It also has a kind of a it's a difficult word, therapy kind of way of working on it.
Hard
so,
work.
but like drawing, sketching, how many hours a day?
I mean, I have an app on my PC that completely tells me how many hours I actually spent in Photoshop, like active. And some days it tells me I did a whopping 4 hours, and other days it tells me I did 12 hours. So it's a bit imbalanced. It's various, and that's very common in freelance work. That's the hardest part about freelance, in my opinion, is finding the balance between work and social life and normal life. Not that 2020 was anything social, but you know. But yeah, it depends. Sometimes I can go on for hours, and sometimes you got to. It's work basically. I just try to make it a 9-to-5 type job, in that I spent the hours on it that I would on work basically.
Really based on an assignment with really clear conditions.
Yes, because if I don't do that, I'll work into midnight and later, which I've done. There are moments where I just had a really bad schedule, which started to affect the art, obviously. So I needed to need to make your own rules. You're your own boss when you're a freelance illustrator. So that was a learning curve.
Yeah, but it's also a pitfall sometimes for a lot of people who are starting off as being a freelancer, is that kind of structure in your work, because you have to make a difference between your social life, some free spare time, and actually working hours. Because if your art is your work, it can be quite dominating, even though if you're working in an assignment.
Exactly. That's why I've been actively separating the two a lot. Like I never post my work on Instagram, for example, or any other social media. I only
No, I
post
was
my...
looking for it, but
Yeah.
I couldn't find it.
I
You're really strict in that.
Yeah, I'm really strict in that. I just want my personal work to be my personal work. I've tried to combine them, but then I just felt that I was applying my personal work for someone else, and then it no longer was personal work. So if I, after a long day of like working on something that is just work, I can like sit upright again because I can do my personal work, even though it's all drawing. It's as if the energy just flows into me. I can draw more, even though I've been drawing for all the day. It's because the personal art is so divided from the actual work that I keep interest in it. And that's also the period in where I do more experimental things. If I want to study something that has no application to work, basically, now's the moment, because it's not attached to anything else you do. It's completely for yourself, and whatever you take out of it, you can maybe later on apply into work. But that separation was very important for me in my mind. Yeah.
Hey, and this is, I showed you already this kind of drawings, but this is like more also from the, how do you say, from references?
Yes.
Or do you like a lot of model drawing, or are you going to sit outside in the park and filling up your dummies? Or?
I loved when I was still in school mostly and went out, because as a freelancer you're sort of holed up a bit more and you have to actively get out, but when train rides, drawing people a lot was tons of fun, and sitting in parks and drawing people was tons of fun. So I try to do that a lot, like live drawings is always better than drawing from photos. But yes, I've also done a lot of photo studies like these. These are also photo studios. Jesus.
Studying, yeah, but are you then studying also, where are you looking for example for this drawing? Are you like checking out the fabric, the hairs, the poses? What is the thing that you're examining?
For this one, I was studying line efficiency. So it's not necessarily the subject itself that I was studying, but I was working with how can I make the cloth of that shirt work the most efficient with the least amount of lines, and working on my simplicity, basically. So I saw a photo, and which was, of course, full of details and hairs and everything, and how can I condense it to a very strong shape.
Clear lines,
Yeah.
actually cleaning
Yes.
the information and try to get the most
Yes.
nice lines out of it.
Yeah.
All right. And this, what were you like analyzing?
It was not a study. This was just
This is just a fun drawing.
yeah, fun drawing, and
but it's a sketch, right? So
Yeah.
there is like reference material. So you
Yes.
draw by pictures, you draw in a park, but also some fun drawing by hand, probably.
yeah, mostly.
And when you are like sketching, what do you normally draw? When you have like a piece of paper, what are like the things? This is kind of a situation. There's like a little story in it.
Yes.
Do you do these things a lot?
This is actually my favorite thing to do. Just small interactions involving girls, food, and cats, I guess.
Okay, girls, food, and cats. That's like
the perfect triangle, I guess. This is just pure joy drawings. It's something I like to do, and have some fun, and something that could make you smile if you see it is good enough for me. If you get that out of it.
all right. And here see a few examples more. This is like more dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
So is there like also your animation background sometimes shines through? Are you also like, what kind of dynamic do you want in your process? I can imagine that like you have the photography, it can be really portrait.
Yeah, the portraits.
But like these kind of action gives a kind of dynamic that you also can use for your storytelling. Is that
something
helps you, your animation background?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think animation helped me a lot, especially the study where I did live drawing. I had to do a lot of gesture drawings, and there's a couple of oefeningen.
Practices?
Practice, I guess.
Training?
Assignments, I guess. We did where the person standing in the room was moving around. So they were sitting at first, and you drew them now sitting, and you have like 20 seconds to draw them sitting. And then they stand up a little higher, and you draw them again, but over the same drawing. And again, and again, and again. So it's almost like an animation on paper. Mm-hmm. So I've been learning a lot to draw people in motion, or in the moment before motion, and that I think helped me get a better grasp on gesture in general for my characters. So definitely animation has been helpful, yes.
All right, so you quit animation, but you still
But
use some of the knowledge you
I
bring
still
it back?
took the points in that are interesting about animation, and I think that's the key part about trying anything. You try it, and the only things you like about it or are that perfect for you, you take, and the rest you don't have to take with you.
This is also an exercise that you do yourself, and this shows a little bit of your process. Can you explain a little bit what you're doing over here in this drawing?
These ones I kept it very loose, sketch-like, because I wanted to train myself to do lineless illustration. I really admire people who are really good at just going straight in. Lineless, yeah, going lineless. But I did not feel completely confident without doing a couple of lines first, so that's where I started. And these were not these were out of my mind, by the way.
So you draw this by hand?
Yeah, this is by hand. But I've been drawing these sort of statically simple gesture from studies a lot. That at some point you can do it out of your head with little problem.
And these kind of drawings you do a lot? Like you draw like 20, 30, 40, 50, or it's one draw it's there?
Yeah, I've never liked drawing a sketch and then making a new layer to make the lines on that sketch, and then making a new layer to clean the... I always work with the same sketch, which is also always very loose in the beginning, and I start to tighten it up. The same sketch over and over, because I felt that sometimes you just pull a line that's... You make a line in the very first sketch that's just perfect, even though it's a bit sloppy, and once you start drawing over it as a sort of line art transition, it becomes static, dead.
Yeah, you see it a lot also in animation, that people have like really
beautiful
sketches, pencil sketches with like blue, red lines in it, and it has like a lot of dynamic. And then when it's cleaned, it's so dead.
Yeah, exactly. So I to counter that, because it was also something that's inherently in me. I love rendering, so counter my own weaknesses was by just working with the sketch I have and just keep the lines that are already perfect from the first stroke, and alter the ones that are not yet.
And then you're filling it in?
Yes, I filled in with basic shapes. It's lasso tool, very simple. One brush, not much push-pass.
Not much details.
Not much details, yes.
Not much push-pass. Maybe it's English, we don't know. You will hear it in. And then there is just like volume, light a little bit, fabric, colors, finding a balance. And then you take away the lines, and then you see
what it looks like, if the shapes are clean in a way. And I did do some cleanup afterwards, because I don't think all shapes worked as well as I would have wanted them. But it was a good way to see how the shapes were looking.
And this is like a little bit the final result with some shading and some like brushes.
Yes, it was. I really wanted to be a bit more atmospheric and have the colors blend into each other a little more. Like I just grabbed the color from the bag she's wearing. I started brushing very lightly on her skirt, so it becomes slightly browner as well. And I made her top of her hair reflect more blue, so it's a bit hazy in a way. I wanted to have that effect, a bit dreamy, basically, because she's also standing there, just having a moment with herself. So it would, I think, work well together.
Hey, and if people want to start with like lineless art, what was like the biggest goal that you got from this exercises? What kind of advice would you give them?
A lasso tool.
Lasso tool.
Lasso tool. Like it's perfect, because you can make a shape, fill that shape, and see if that shape works. And if it doesn't work, you alter the shape. So it's very clear, direct, visual that tells you, this doesn't work. And if it's hard at first to just do lasso tool shaping, make a sketch, underline sketch. Like I made an underline sketch just to help me out on what I actually wanted, and then I went forward and just took them away and went on with just the shapes. Basically.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is another illustration and also a breakdown. What was your goal in this drawing?
Atmosphere, basically, and storytelling. I wanted to have an interaction with an animal, like two people walking in a park, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, what are you doing there?" Kind of moment. And so it's just the beginning of an interaction is what I wanted to capture atmospheric situation.
Hey, and also light plays an important role in this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with light in this? Because I can imagine it's quite difficult, like shadows, light, and because I sometimes I see a lot of drawings, but they don't have the angle of the light correctly. Yeah. So then it become a little bit more flat or like a little bit uncanny.
Mm-hmm.
What's like an important rule for you how you treat light?
The important rule is knowing where the light's going to be coming from the beginning before you even start drawing. That's why I usually start out a little darker in my illustrations and pretend there is no light yet, as if everything is in shadow, and later on add my light. Because if I do it the opposite way, make everything light and add the shadows, it always becomes inconsistent in some way. And I think having nothing and then slowly adding what needs to be is way more overzichtelijk.
Okay, that's more overview.
Yeah, more overview to it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So you start with like quite low brightness.
Yes, low brightness, mid-tones, and also in saturation the same thing.
Yeah.
Not too saturated reds, because once you start going over those colors with like overlay layers or any brightening type of blending modes in Photoshop, it will become brighter. It will become more saturated. And if the rest is also saturated, then there is no feeling as if there's any light added. So if you start off a bit more subdued, it pops out wherever you make light. It makes it more pop, basically.
Yeah. And then you just give the highlights on the specific objects.
Yes.
And fabrics that you want to focus on.
Exactly. Yes.
Because you keep, even though this is quite like a busy, there's like a lot of leaves and there's like a foreground, background, the branches. It's a forest, so it's quite a lot of information. But how do you make a choice on where to focus on? How do you create that kind of depth in it? Because you keep your silhouettes quite clear, etc.
Yes.
It's still readable.
I try to make the circle back at the back of their heads to be lighter, which make their silhouette of their faces the more
really
interesting.
Clear, so you have a clear focus.
So I have a clear focus. So you start looking. Of course, faces are also the first thing people mostly look at, and I wanted to have them interact with the character. So the character, the acorn. The squirrel. Also got a bit of.
I almost wanted to say unicorn, but it's
unicorn.
Almost. But that's a different kind of animal.
Yes. So I also got some dabbled light on him. If he was completely in shadow, it wouldn't match. All the main areas got their dabbled light on them to connect them. I think about it in very loose visuals. I don't give myself rules on, okay, now the character always needs to be light behind his head because that works or something. But it works in certain illustrations, and then it's appropriate to use that. So that's what I did for this one.
We're going to look at another breakdown because we're eager to learn from you, of course. This is like your composition. This is also a reference of photo or a combination of things?
Combination. Only the staircase had the little top area had a reference photo, and there was also a person sitting there, so I did have a scale reference from the photo, and that's what I used as a base to then apply my own coloring and shading in.
So you create your own color palettes. Is there like a specific choice of colors that you use?
Yes,
do you have like limited, only 5 colors, or how do you work normally?
For my colors, I tend to always work in warm-cold situations, and sometimes more cold, sometimes more warm, but having the general rule of those two being balanced always generates an interesting piece. So that's, I guess, my only rule that I always apply to an illustration.
And natural colors, and I see like really earthy.
I really love earthy tones, earthy colors, like subdued reds or oranges are one of my favorite colors, and in combination with soft blues and soft greens. So I tend to use those the most often, I think.
I thought so. And here then you have you created like a little shading just to get like an impression about how you want to treat with the light.
Yes.
And then starts like a little bit of line art, and then you're filling in already some details. Yeah,
the left one I only the lasso tool shape fills and still studies a bit from the photo itself, how the light hits the staircases. But of course I took some artistic liberty because the staircases weren't that blue or that purpley. I made them a bit more cartoony in color, I think, a bit softer. And afterwards I started working on the foliage. I did go and search for like plants. I wanted to have like an orange plant, so how do they look? I'll just grab one, go from beginning to end, finish of the whole little tree, and then go on to the next. And for whatever I think I need a reference, I'll just search in between the illustrations. Because sometimes you just hit something and it doesn't come out. You just don't understand how it works. So it's okay to just look up some reference in between the process that I did.
Nowadays, more and more you see people using 3D software, like for getting a good impression about how to treat light, or because perspective sometimes is difficult for artists, so they use it as a reference and make it like a quick build-up or like a SketchUp kind of situation. Are you sometimes use that?
No, actually I haven't. I do have Clip Studio Paint since recently, and they have a lot of great features for that. I've been using a couple of perspective tools inside, but it's just the making of a 3D environment in where I can then train myself to draw like characters in different perspectives. But I've never like looked up a 3D tree or character as a reference, because I always feel they are a little more stiff, on the stiff side, and that doesn't work for me. I need to see someone in extreme motions or in a very natural pose. That's also for references. I use Pinterest. But the bad side about Pinterest is that it's mostly a bit like studio photos. So it's, you know,
it's all staged.
It's all a bit staged. But there's a term that's called cutout people or cutout.
I didn't know, but now I know.
But these are people that are just photographed in random streets, and then their silhouettes are cut out and pasted on like a board. So it's very like just, you know, simple men and women just sitting in very natural poses, and I always take those types over any like staged poses, because they're way more natural. The way someone's hand just leans on something is a nice touch. I like adding. That's how I look at my reference for humans, at least.
Hey, and in this, specifically also in this illustration, but also in the others that I already showed, there's like a kind of warmth. So we already discussed about the earthy tones, and it's of course also quite warm colors. But there is always like, you treat light as this like this
a character.
Nicely, almost a character, but like a warm kind of calming kind of situation.
Yes.
What's that look? Is it like the blurry? Are you using the light in a specific way? Are you saturating with yellow? How are you able to create that
softness?
That warm atmosphere in your compositions.
I also use blending tools like overlay and linear dodge are my favorite ones. In of course, yes, with a more orangey toned, slightly red toned hue color. And go over it very lightly with an airbrush, for example. Or I lock the layers, like the one in the previous one, where it's just the light and the shadow. The light has its own mask, basically, so I can always work with it without influencing the shadow. So once I've decided my divide and where light and darkness is going to be in the illustration, I can just select that very simply and start working the light into it, so it doesn't go over where it doesn't need to be. So for this example, it's light that's sort of bouncing back. So I did want to have some light come back. So I had the reflection of the orange light be hitting the girl from under, or the staircases that are closest by to the light source, to give a much more atmospheric effect than just the straight shadows.
This is a bit older one, but I also like this GIF. Here you see some sketches. How you draw.
Yes, these are like really focused on line efficiency studies. We're really trying to get the cloth to feel like a cloth without too much extras.
You also see, when I watched some of your clips, I saw that you're using the mirror tool quite often. Why do you use it?
If I do that, then I see the mistakes I make in illustrations. Sometimes you start to lopside your characters a bit too much, or some things are just, it's a bit automatic that happens, and once you start flipping, you can start correcting these weird automatic things that happens to every person, I think, when they're drawing. So it's a good way to take a new look.
Yeah. Sometimes when you make a drawing and you put it, actually a live drawing, and you put it in front of a mirror, you say,
bad
perspective, and the person is falling towards the back. So it really helps you to get like a more grounded
Yes.
and more balanced drawing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I do that a lot. It feels good to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is also like line efficiency, line art
Yes.
drawings.
Like testing things, and I've always gotten criticism from my teachers that I drew in a more knitting-like way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I knit from one point to the other point without making structures in between. I've gotten comments on that why is there no under sketch? Why just go straight from face to arm and forward? But when I do studies, I cannot do an under layer. I see what I want to draw and I start to directly draw those things. If I do an underlayer, I will just make it the study more muddy, and I'll start making like 3 lines where there only needs to be 1 line. I start to be lazy. So when doing studies like these, the efficiency studies, it's better to go in and just find that right line and then go on and not... and it's okay to go back and change it, because some lines might not be good after all. After you have set the rest of a couple of lines, it's relative to each other, obviously. But the undersketch, verdoezeld,
Hiding?
is hiding the study a little or something. It's making it not too straightforward for yourself. Yeah, you need to see for yourself: is this line bad? Yes, it's bad. And if you're going to be all sweet about it and make like sweet undersketches, then it becomes hard to see if you're actually doing a good job, I think. Yeah. So no opacity on your brushes and just go straight with that hard, mean line that tells you how wrong you are, basically, yeah.
All right. Good advice. This is like another topic I want to discuss. It's more the storyboarding of storytelling.
Yes.
And you're using really like dark tones and light, etc., to bring a kind of drama composition in it.
Yes.
Do you do a lot of boards? Do you do this also for your work commercially, or do you do, or is this like a personal project and you're just trying to create?
It's part of a personal project. I sometimes get jobs to do so, and I work for a comic as well. So there is some overlap here and there, but I mostly like to do these in private to have some built-up skill in that, see if I can find some more interesting ways to make composition for my personal work, but also for work in general, more the experimental side of personal work, basically.
And from illustration to more sequential work, what's always your goal in this? Of what is like your challenge? Because it's a different way of telling a story, of course. So.
Yeah, storytelling in general is always has been the goal for these, because when I did these, I felt like that most of my illustrations lacked story. There's also always an underlying thing that I want to highlight in an illustration, but I felt that I was lacking that. So with these type of illustrations, I wanted to really tell something about about the story, which people could actively recall and. Train myself to be clearer in the choices I make to help the story shine, basically. So even if
this is from a script, or is just a visual script, or did you translated it from written stories?
No, this is just go off of a theme that I just have, and let's go. How can I tell the story of someone working really hard into the night on their math test and just thinking, oh, I'm gonna fail so hard, and how to tell that story without any dialogue. Yeah.
And these has like also kind of dynamic. We all know like X-Men, etc. So power. Like
for this one, I really wanted to test movement, like the filter, blur, motion blur, zeg maar. That one, and see if I could get that power in. Because I almost always do very static, calm snapshot moments of people in peace. So I was just thinking, can I do this? Okay, let's try. If I can do this, okay, I can do it to some degree. Okay, nice to know that I can perhaps do that for an illustration or something.
Yeah, but it has like a really nice dynamic in it. So like trying out these kind of stuff really helps you also to tell a story in your picture, but just using different kind of techniques. Of course. In the end, it's a little bit the same than making a more static illustration, but in the end, it tells a story. But,
sure.
And this?
Yes, very.
This is like a study on like shadow, light, and.
It was also a combination of the two. I wanted to have like a striking image in terms of values and shapes and colors, and the combination of the small character versus the big character. How I'm gonna tell that story. I think it wasn't a complete success, but I learned a lot from making this illustration nonetheless.
All right. And this is like just imaginary shots from a film that you have.
I figure what would the shot like this look like, and what color choices would I make, and having the light come in from the right upper and the lower left, and then it be framed in the dark center, because it's a bit of a sad moment. Like the girl just burned her cookies, and the mother's like, "No, it's fine, honey, it's fine." That's the feeling. So it's a private little moment between two family members. Same for this one. Same technique applied, and they're surrounded by light, and their little moments together, the faces meeting in the shadow. So deliberate choice in that.
You have ambitions in making films? Would that be like an interest of you, or would you say?
I've been recently thinking about visual development. Seems really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope to get better at these type of storytelling situations, and also in color, not just black and white, but really expand on that, and hopefully do some jobs in that. That would be nice. Yeah.
So you're training and preparing yourself for that kind of visual development jobs.
But that's the point of personal art, I think. Like if you're doing work right now and you want to go further in something completely else, or a talk and a section different from what you're doing, then in your personal work, this is the work you need to do to get there and get a feel for it, and then you can start applying and posting it in your portfolio. So yeah.
So you're improving your portfolio, training your skills to bring that kind of storytelling techniques into your work.
Hopefully,
as well.
yes.
Yeah. Hey, and I also stumble upon this more background landscape kind of settings. You don't see that much of environmental topics in your work. Is it because you don't like it that much, or it's even more? Is there a reason for?
I really just love interaction between characters, or they're them in their own environments, and I just love the human body a bit more than a vast landscape of any kind.
Here's another example. This is more a color study?
I wanted to have the same sort of feel from the previous ones, but then try one in color, like the lineless version of these variants. So it's all experimental in that sense.
Yeah, because color boarding, like if you're mentioning just like making the board story-wise with light and dark, and you also have color boards that actually really tells the story as well. So you're also trying to fill
trying to work on it at least and get better at it. Yes.
And like brushes and using different kind of styles in this.
Get dynamic in it. Yeah, brushes is also a thing. I usually say, like you can draw anything with any brush, and it's true in most cases. But sometimes you just need a very specific look. So I will dedicate an evening of just trying out all kinds of different settings and modes to find something unique that I can then work with or add to my other techniques, basically. Yeah.
Hey, and now. Then I'm going to show now like a lot of more recent work. We saw like earlier work. We were discussing like your process, and also like more the storytelling aspects that you're developing at this moment. And there are more and more and more people now at this day drawing. Do you think that's it? Of course, that's a good thing that's happening at this moment. But there's also like a lot of competition.
Yes.
Also for getting work, getting into the job, working for AAA studios. There's like they are trying to get as much as people in, and it's a booming business. Do you feel that kind of stress? Do you have the stress to work for AAA companies? Do you be?
I had that stress a lot when I just got out of school and needed to work around the industry and break into the industry. That was a moment in where I was really trying to be appealing to those type of companies. I didn't see anyone else except those type of companies. I was like, oh, I need to work there, or else I'm a failure as an artist. Was the thought process. So it gave me a lot of stress, and I tried to change my original style to something that would appeal more to them, or I would just straight up draw their characters, for example, and get an idea of how they look and how they work, so that I could apply with them, for example. That was my thought process. And there was a time that I really wanted to work for Applebot, the Legend of the Cryptids.
Yeah.
So I really went in and started to make these, make their style illustrations. But when I did that a few times, I found out that I actually don't like working in their style. So the feeling of wanting to work there is sort of, removed itself by just doing their work. And nowadays I feel much more at ease at jobs where I get more creative freedom. So even if the company is not renowned, like for example, I work for an indie game right now. We're with 4 people, which is not a lot, but I'm the only artist there, and I get all the say in when it comes to art and style choices and everything. And that has given me a way more happiness than if I were to be a small wheel in a big machine in a bigger company.
What kind of artists do you admire in that sense? Do you think that they found, in your opinion, a good balance in that? Is there like an example or a peer that you say, okay, the way this studio works or this freelancer, how they...
There's an artist I really love. I think I'm going to butcher his name though. I think I'm going to butcher his name though, but he's called Ate Galen. Ate Galen.
We're going to look it up.
Snotty on Instagram. I really love his work, and he's also worked for bigger companies, and but he recently quit from Riot, I believe, to start his own company, and he has big dreams and made his own art book with lovely artworks that I like to look at and take inspiration from. So yeah, his path is very inspiring for me currently.
Hey, in the future, what's like the biggest challenge for you in the future? What's your dream project? What's the thing you're working towards?
This character.
Rosie.
Yeah, and also I have a story written that I would like to make a comic of, and really trying to find the most time to create the comic. It's an ongoing process, and I'm learning a lot through the making of it. And I've had conversations with publishers in case they wanted to publish the comic. So I'm really excited about all those.
Publishers.
Yeah.
Get in touch.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We wish you all the best, and I hope the comic will be published really soon. Thank you so much, Ilse, for sharing all your knowledge and all your work with us tonight. Hope to see you all next week. Can I have like a big applause for Ilse in the chat, of course, and hopefully see you next time by Playgrounds in Depth. See you all. Bye bye. Thank you so much, Ilse.
No problem. I was glad you had me.